Bitcoin is only being used less than 1% of its full power. The whole point, thesis for Ethereum's existence is Bitcoin is great, maybe as an asset or store value, but you cannot do smart contract. This is not true. I want to change people's perspective that Bitcoin is not only for hodl.
Today, we're joined by the founder of Upcat Layer, Dr. Bruce Liu, to discuss what Upcat really means, why it matters for the future of Bitcoin, and what opportunities it will open for developers in the broader ecosystem. All right, Dr. Liu, for people who have never heard of you before, can you briefly introduce yourself and what you are building with Upcat Layer?
So before that, just give you a brief intro. I did my PhD in computer science, actually specializing in peer-to-peer distributed networking, the fundamental technology that powers Bitcoin. So that's how I get to know Bitcoin in the very early days. After graduate, I've been working with in Silicon Valley for quite a few years, mostly as a research scientist for Facebook, before it, rebranded to Meta. Since 2017, I've been full-time in crypto, so-called Web3 or blockchain space. And more specifically, since 2018, I've been exclusively focusing all my energy and efforts on Bitcoin technology itself. I think it's one of the most underestimated technology, not only in Bitcoin space, but also in the whole crypto space. And we have a lot of potential that can be unlocked, but for many reasons, Bitcoin is only being used less than 1% of its full power. And that's what we are trying to do at Upcat Layer. So basically to unlock the full potential of Bitcoin technology to its maximum potential.
From your perspective, what are the biggest limitations of Bitcoin today?
Why do people think we're still in a world of blockchains, we still need Ethereum or other blockchains? Is because there's some fundamental misunderstanding. For example, most famously is Ethereum, right? The whole point, thesis for Ethereum's existence is Bitcoin is great, maybe as an asset or store value, but it's not, you cannot do smart contract. This is not true. So if Bitcoin can do smart contract and it has a way to scale, why do we need other blockchains? But what we are trying to achieve today is that's far from true. So the fundamental, let's say, switch to turn Bitcoin into, the mother of all chains is this technology we are building today called OPCAT.
For people new to the topic, what exactly is OPCAT? And how does OPCAT help address the limitations you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, it all goes back to the guy who invented the whole industry, Satoshi Nakamoto. So you think about Bitcoin is also a computer. So this computer, it takes different instructions, right? It's like any other computer or virtual machine. But this computer takes instructions. Like you can add things together, you can multiply things together. And one of the opcode is called OPCAT. The meaning stands for operation concatenation. And this cat is a computer science term, concatenation. So what does it mean? So for example, you have bit and then you have coin and then you cat them together, you get Bitcoin, right? So it sounds very, very simple, but it's very, very powerful. It's the most powerful technology on Bitcoin today. As I said earlier, Bitcoin has two biggest issues today, namely programmability and second, scalability. The OPCAT at the same time can solve both problems. Ethereum is programmable because they have this virtual machine. It also has so-called different opcodes. Add things, you can multiply things. You also can concatenate things together. So for Bitcoin, if you have OPCAT using all this opcodes invented by Satoshi himself, it's not by me, it's not by the core developers, it's by Satoshi himself. That's the keyword. He invented all this since day one. So once we can bring back all those opcodes like OPCAT, Bitcoin can do native smart contract. It's as programmable as Ethereum. So that just brings another entirely new dimension into Bitcoin's capability.
Why do you think Bitcoin ecosystem is gaining so much attention again right now?
Because it's still the biggest market cap. I mean, of course, it's just because the opportunity is just unlimited. If you look at other chains, for example, Ethereum, maybe Solana, a lot of people argue this are the top three in terms of branding and activity. But if you look at the other ecosystems, I wouldn't say it's fully mature, but it's already very developed, meaning you get all the infrastructure, you get all the apps. Right now, it's very difficult, I would say, to compete with the incumbents, existing big players. They're already been developed for a long time. It's quite mature. Bitcoin is its biggest asset class, but look at the ecosystem. It's still tiny. If you look at all the assets on Ethereum or Solana, compare the TVL versus the market cap, usually it's about 30 or maybe 50%. But look at Bitcoin at the high point, it's about 2 trillion. But if you look at the ecosystem, it's maybe 20 billion at the most. So that's less than 1%. That meaning if you regard Bitcoin follow a similar trajectory with other chains, that's still at least 10 times, even 100 times. And as Bitcoin grows even bigger, it's 1,000 times opportunity there. I think that's the biggest potential that's waiting to be unlocked. So that's why I think, especially after ordinals, a lot of builders, they come to Bitcoin because this is like a Wild West. Of course, for the past year, that's because of the market conditions. I think a lot of, let's say project teams, they're not as active as it used to be, but still, I think this is still the biggest potential in the crypto space.
What has been the biggest challenge building infrastructure in the Bitcoin ecosystem so far?
I've been into Bitcoin since 2018. I know it's not something you can just buy and hodl as an asset. That's one use case, but it's much more than that. Bitcoin, think about like an iPhone. Of course, you can use it as like a flip phone. You can make a calls, which is people using it to hold as an asset, but that's not the most popular use case. So if you want to have a smartphone, I don't think you're making calls all the time. You probably do 100 other things. You do Google Maps, play games, you probably trade crypto. You can use Twitter, social media, everything. So Bitcoin today is just like that. It's like iPhone just come on the market and there's no app store and the developer tool is very clumsy and compared to old incumbents like Nokia. Just because it's so big and technically it's designed so well, I think it's just a matter of time for it to catch up.
If Opcat becomes broadly adopted, what kinds of applications or new capabilities could emerge on Bitcoin?
Yeah, the short answer is anything that's possible on other blockchains and maybe impossible to do on other blockchains, you can bring it back to Bitcoin. So for example, the most popular use case is so-called DeFi, right? You can have trust lending, you can have Uniswap style, AMM, you can have Aave style lending. You can also launch your own tokens in a pump fund.like way. So all of this is already live on our network. It's already launched on Opcat because of this technology called Opcat, and it reuses everything is from Bitcoin technology itself. For example, you still do mining through proof of work. You are still using UTXO model. So if you have been doing anything on Bitcoin layer 1, once you migrate to our layer, you can find the UX experience is just much, it's the same fundamental UX, but everything is just faster, cheaper. For example, on Bitcoin, if you send some Bitcoin, you probably have to pay. Sometimes the fees went through the roof. You may pay sometimes $50. But on our layer, you are still transacting. You're paying fees in Bitcoin, but everything is cheaper and faster. For example, you only pay like 0.1 cent. You can even pay 1 Satoshi or even less than 1 Satoshi as fees. And they always stay there low. And also it's instantaneous, meaning if I send you some Bitcoin on our layer, it's just under 1 second, you already receive it. You don't have to wait to be mined. We use some technology powered by Satoshi's original design. And this is just DeFi application.
Now, looking ahead 3 to 5 years, what role do you hope Opcat layer will play in the future of Bitcoin?
So in the next couple of years, and even midterm, maybe 5 to 10 years, I would want to, using Opcat layer, I want to change people's mindset. Hey, Bitcoin is not just for hodl. It's much more than that. Everything you can do on other blockchains, you can do it. You can do everything on the mother chain itself without leaving the ecosystem, using its native technology. You are not using some like a hybrid. For example, you can already do tokens, right? As we've been seeing through BSC20s and ordinals. But what I want to achieve through Opcat layer is to go to another level, to the next level. Hey, Bitcoin can be used for payments, which I think is like called the Bitcoin 1.0. And also then you can do tokens, which is like Bitcoin 2.0. I'm arguing through Opcat layer, I want to change people's perspective. Hey, Bitcoin can also do smart contract and thus can do all this so-called fancy applications previously thought impossible. For example, DeFi, you can do lending, you can do AMM, you can do pump fund like swap, which is, by the way, we already launched mainnet. This is not only theory. This is all, you can go to our website, you can download the wallet and put some Bitcoin and you can play it today. And you can find it's fast, cheap, and super scalable and super programmable. So I want to change the landscape, saying Bitcoin is not only for hodl, it can also be the best building platform for all the builders out there. And we are going to make all the developer tooling, all the docs, all the examples, just make Bitcoin, let's say, great again. Okay.